The metal pin beneath her nurse's badge had survived 3 combat deployments and 16 confirmed saves under enemy fire. But in a Colorado courtroom on a freezing February morning, it made Claire Donovan look like a fraud. Judge Marcus Brennan didn't ask questions. He saw a tired ER nurse in wrinkled scrubs standing beside a homeless veteran, and he decided she was performing. "Remove that," he ordered, voice sharp enough to silence the gallery. "This isn't theater." Claire's hand didn't move to comply. She didn't flinch. She just stood there, blue eyes fixed forward, while the prosecutor smirked and court security started walking her way. No one in that room knew what she'd left behind when she traded her combat medic kit for hospital shifts. And no one realized that the quiet phone call being made in the hallway was about to crack this case wide open. If you want to see how this story ends, how the truth destroys every lie they told about her, stay with me until the final word. Like this video, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. And let's get into it. The Summit County Courthouse in Ridgefield, Colorado wasn't built for drama. It was a low gray building tucked between a hardware store and a shuttered diner, the kind of place where cases got processed like factory work, quick, quiet, forgettable. Most proceedings lasted under 30 minutes. Defendants shuffled in, pled out, shuffled back to wherever they came from. Lawyers checked their phones. Judges worked through dockets like assembly lines. But on February 14th, Courtroom 3 became something else entirely. Claire Donovan pushed through the heavy oak doors at 9:47 a.m., 13 minutes before veteran Kenneth Walsh's hearing was scheduled to begin. She'd come straight from Maplewood General Hospital after pulling a double shift in the ER, 16 hours of overdoses, car wrecks, and a kitchen fire victim who'd coded twice before she brought him back. Her scrubs were creased. Her dark blonde hair was pulled into a bun that had mostly given up. The blue surgical mask hanging around her neck still had someone else's blood on it. She looked exactly like what she was, exhausted. But there was something in the way she moved, measured, efficient, aware of every person and exit in the room, that didn't quite match the tired nurse aesthetic. She scanned the gallery, counted 12 people, noted the bailiff's position near the side door, and took a seat in the second row on the left. Close enough to see, far enough to stay out of the way. Kenneth Walsh sat alone at the defendant's table, 71 years old and drowning in a suit jacket 2 sizes too big. His hands shook, not from nerves. Claire recognized the tremor immediately. Parkinson's, maybe early-stage MS. His attorney, a public defender named Aaron Bryce, who looked about 25 and overworked by a decade, was flipping through a file with the frantic energy of someone who'd gotten the case that morning. Claire had never met Kenneth Walsh before yesterday. She'd found him outside the VA clinic on Cypress Avenue, sitting on a bench in the rain with a citation in his hand and nowhere to go. The clinic had turned him away, something about missed appointments and unpaid balances. He'd been trying to sell his military medals online to cover medical bills. Someone reported him. Now he was facing charges for illegal sale of government property. "They think I stole them," he told her, voice cracking. "Like I'd steal my own damn service." Claire had given him her number, bought him lunch, and showed up today because nobody else would. The metal beneath her hospital badge pressed against her ribs. She'd worn it twice in the last 8 years. Once at a funeral, once at a ceremony she'd left early. Today made 3. At 9:58 a.m., Judge Marcus Brennan entered from his chambers. He was 52, silver-haired, with the kind of face that looked carved from courtroom mahogany, all hard angles and judicial authority. He'd been on the bench for 11 years. His record was clean, his reputation was solid. He ran a tight courtroom and didn't tolerate disruptions. He also didn't tolerate anything that looked like performance. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Everyone stood. Brennan took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and opened the case file. His eyes moved over the documents with practiced speed, absorbing details most people would need 10 minutes to process. Then his gaze lifted and swept the courtroom. It stopped on Claire. Specifically, it stopped on the small bronze star pinned just below her hospital ID badge. His expression shifted. Not much, just enough. "Bailiff," he said quietly. "Who is that?" The bailiff glanced over. Looks like a visitor, Your Honor." "Does she have business before this court?" "Not listed, sir." Brennan's jaw tightened. He looked back at Kenneth Walsh, then at Claire again. Approach the bench, he said, voice clipped. Aaron Bryce stood immediately. Your Honor, I believe that's... I didn't ask you, counselor. The woman in scrubs. Approach. Claire didn't hesitate. She walked forward, footsteps silent on the old tile floor, and stopped at the gate separating the gallery from the well of the courtroom. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look defiant. She just looked present. Brennan leaned forward. You're wearing a military decoration in my courtroom. Yes, Your Honor. On what authority? It was issued to me. By whom? U.S. Department of Defense. For what? Claire's expression didn't change. Medical service. Brennan's eyes narrowed. You're a nurse. I am now. Before? Combat medic, attached to Special Operations, Middle East Theater. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman named Dana Clifton, who'd been sorting papers at her table, looked up sharply. Your Honor, she cut in, if I may... You may not. Brennan didn't take his eyes off Claire. You're telling me you earned that medal in active combat? Yes, Your Honor. Then you should know better than to wear it to a civilian court proceeding. His voice dropped, cold and precise. This is a legal matter, not a PR stunt. Remove it. Claire's hand moved to the medal, slowly. She unpinned it, held it for a moment, then slipped it into her scrub's pocket. Thank you, Brennan said. Now sit down. She turned and walked back to her seat. No argument, no protest. Kenneth Walsh twisted in his chair, eyes wide and apologetic, but Claire shook her head once. It's fine. It wasn't fine. Dana Clifton stood. Your Honor, I'd like to address something, Brennan gestured. Go ahead. The defendant has been accompanied today by an individual wearing what appears to be unauthorized military insignia. I'd like clarification on whether this constitutes an attempt to improperly influence the court through emotional manipulation. Objection, Aaron Bryce said, half rising. Ms. Donovan isn't a party to this case. She's a member of the public. She's sitting directly behind the defendant wearing a medal in a case about stolen military honors, Clifton fired back. That's not coincidence. That's theater. Brennan held up a hand. Counselor, the medal has been removed. Move on. But Clifton wasn't done. She had that look, the one prosecutors get when they smell blood in the water. Your Honor, I'd like to request verification of Ms. Donovan's service record. If she's claiming military honors she didn't earn, that's a federal offense under the Stolen Valor Act. The courtroom went quiet. Claire sat perfectly still. Her breathing didn't change. Her posture didn't shift. But something in the air around her seemed to tighten. Aaron Bryce stood fully now. Your Honor, this is absurd. Ms. Donovan isn't on trial here. She's presenting herself as a decorated veteran in a case about fraudulent medals, Clifton countered. The court has a responsibility to verify the legitimacy of... Enough! Brennan's voice cut through the argument like a gavel strike. He looked at Claire. Ms. Donovan, do you have documentation proving your service? Not with me, Claire said evenly. Can you provide it? Yes, Your Honor. Then I'm ordering you to do so within 48 hours, or I'll hold you in contempt. He glanced at the bailiff. And until that verification is provided, you're barred from this courtroom. Remove her. Kenneth Walsh shot to his feet. She's only here to help me. Sit down, Mr. Walsh, before I add obstruction to your charges. The bailiff moved toward Claire. She stood before he reached her, smoothing her scrubs with hands that didn't shake. She walked toward the aisle, chin level, eyes forward. This is ridiculous, someone muttered from the back row. Brennan's head snapped toward the voice. One more outburst and I'll clear this gallery. Claire reached the doors, pushed through, stepped into the hallway. The doors swung shut behind her. Inside, Dana Clifton smiled thinly and opened her file. Kenneth Walsh looked like he might be sick. Aaron Bryce was already scribbling notes for an appeal he probably couldn't afford to file. And Judge Marcus Brennan returned his attention to the docket, satisfied that order had been restored. None of them saw the man in the hallway lift his phone to his ear. None of them heard him say, "You need to get down here, now!" Claire stood in the corridor outside courtroom 3, back against the wall, eyes closed. She wasn't praying. She wasn't panicking. She was just breathing. The hallway smelled like floor wax and old coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a clerk's phone rang and rang and rang. She'd known this might happen. The moment she decided to wear the medal, she knew someone might question it, might challenge her, might force her to prove something she'd spent 8 years trying to bury. But Kenneth Walsh had been sitting on that bench in the rain, hands shaking, eyes hollow, and Claire couldn't walk past him. Not when she'd seen that look before. Not when she knew exactly where it led. So she'd made a choice. Now she was paying for it. Footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Quick, purposeful. A man in his mid-40s rounded the corner, wearing a charcoal suit and a military lapel pin Claire recognized immediately. Trident insignia, Naval Special Warfare. He stopped when he saw her. Claire Donovan? She opened her eyes. Who's asking? Commander Lucas Hayes, SEAL Team 7 liaison. He didn't offer his hand. I got a call from someone in that courtroom. Said you were being removed for wearing unauthorized honors. Claire straightened. It's handled. Doesn't sound handled. I can provide my DD-214. Judge wants verification. I'll send it. That's not why I'm here. Hayes studied her with the sharp, assessing gaze of someone trained to read people under pressure. What's your connection to Kenneth Walsh? I met him yesterday. He needed someone. And you just decided to show up? Yes. Why? Claire held his gaze. Because nobody else did. Hayes didn't respond immediately. He glanced toward the courtroom doors, then back at her. You know what they're saying in there? Prosecutor is calling you a fraud. Judge thinks you're grandstanding. They're about to destroy that man's case because you walked in wearing a medal you earned bleeding in Kandahar province. I know. So why the hell did you do it? Because he's a veteran who's being criminalized for trying to survive, Claire said quietly. And I wasn't going to let him sit in there alone. Hayes studied her for another long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. I'm making a call. Stay here. Commander, that's not a request. He walked a few steps away, phone to his ear, voice low. Claire couldn't hear the conversation, didn't try. She leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes again. She thought about the last time she'd worn the medal. Lieutenant Jamie Herrera's funeral. 28 years old, killed by an IED outside Kabul. Claire had been stateside by then, 2 years into her nursing degree, trying to build a life that didn't involve body bags and triage tags. She'd stood in the back at Arlington, wearing the medal because Jamie's mother had asked her to. He always said you saved him first, the woman had whispered, before he saved anyone else. Claire hadn't corrected her, hadn't explained that she'd saved Jamie 3 times before the 4th one killed him, hadn't mentioned that she still heard his voice sometimes, calling for morphine in a language she'd learned to understand without words. She'd worn the medal, said nothing, left before the reception, just like she'd do today. Hayes finished his call and walked back. Okay, here's what's happening. I've contacted JAG and the VA regional office. They're pulling your service record now, full verification, complete citation history, everything. That's not necessary. It is, actually, because in about 20 minutes, that prosecutor is going to request a federal inquiry into your service history. And when she does, I want every piece of documentation locked and loaded. Claire looked at him. Why are you doing this? Because I know who you are, Hayes said simply. Maybe not personally, but I know the unit you were attached to. I know what you did. And I'm not letting some small-town judge and an overreaching prosecutor drag your name through the mud because they didn't bother to check their facts. I don't need defending. Yeah, well, you're getting it anyway. He checked his phone. Stay here. I'm going back in. Commander, that's an order, Donovan. He turned and walked toward the courtroom doors. Claire watched him go, jaw tight, hands curled into fists at her sides. She didn't want this, didn't want the attention, the questions, the spotlight. She'd left that life behind for a reason. Trading combat boots for hospital clogs, tactical gear for scrubs, life or death triage for controlled chaos in an ER where she could save people without wondering if they'd be dead by sunrise. But Kenneth Walsh was in that courtroom right now, probably drowning under the weight of charges he couldn't fight, represented by a lawyer who didn't have time and facing a judge who'd already decided how this story ended. And Claire knew exactly what that felt like, so she stayed. Inside courtroom 3, Marcus Brennan was halfway through Kenneth Walsh's preliminary hearing when the doors opened. Commander Lucas Hayes walked in. military dress uniform, ribbons and insignia on full display. He moved with the kind of confidence that didn't ask for permission. The bailiff started to intercept him, but Hayes held up a hand, flashing credentials. Commander Lucas Hayes, Naval Special Warfare. I'm here on official business related to this case. Brennan looked up sharply. This is a civilian proceeding, Commander. Unless you're subpoenaed, I'm here to provide testimony regarding the service record of Claire Donovan. The courtroom went still. Dana Clifton stood. Your Honor, I haven't requested military testimony. You requested verification, Hayes said, turning toward her. I'm providing it. I requested documentation, not a witness. You implied Ms. Donovan committed stolen valor. That's a federal accusation. I'm here to set the record straight. Brennan's face hardened. Commander, I appreciate your service, but you can't simply walk into my courtroom and I can if the integrity of a decorated veteran is being publicly questioned without cause, Hayes interrupted. Ms. Donovan served as a combat medic attached to NavySEAL units conducting direct action operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. She holds a Bronze Star with Valor, a Purple Heart, and a combat medical badge. Her service record is spotless, and she's being treated like a criminal because she had the audacity to show up for a fellow veteran. Silence. Kenneth Walsh stared at Hayes like he'd just watched water turn into wine. Dana Clifton's face flushed. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. You opened this door, Counselor, Brennan said quietly. His voice had changed. The edge was still there, but something else had crept in. Doubt. Maybe embarrassment. Commander Hayes, do you have verification of Ms. Donovan's service? Hayes pulled a tablet from his briefcase, tapped the screen, and held it up. Her full DD-214, citation records, and command endorsements, all verified through the Department of Defense record system. I can forward this to the court clerk immediately. Brennan studied the screen. His jaw worked silently. Why didn't she present this earlier? Because she didn't think she'd need to, Hayes said flatly. She came here to support a veteran, not to defend her own honor against baseless accusations. Dana Clifton sat down slowly. She looked like someone who'd just realized she'd walked into a trap she'd set herself. Aaron Bryce, the public defender, was frantically taking notes. Kenneth Walsh had tears in his eyes. Brennan set down his gavel, removed his glasses, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. Where's Ms. Donovan now? In the hallway, Hayes said, where your bailiff escorted her. Bring her back in. Your Honor, Clifton started. Now, Counselor. Brennan's voice was steel. The bailiff hesitated, then moved toward the doors. Hayes turned to leave, but Brennan's voice stopped him. Commander, one question. Yes, Your Honor? How did you know to come here? Hayes smiled thinly. Someone in this courtroom made a phone call to someone who knew exactly who Claire Donovan was, and that person called me. Who? I'm not at liberty to say. Brennan's eyes moved across the gallery. No one moved, no one spoke. The doors opened. Claire stepped back into the courtroom. She looked exactly the same, tired, rumpled, composed. But now every eye in the room was on her, and the energy had shifted. The mocking smirks were gone. The casual dismissal had evaporated. She walked to the gate, stopped, and waited. Brennan cleared his throat. Ms. Donovan, Commander Hayes has provided verification of your service. I apologize for the misunderstanding. Claire nodded once, said nothing. You're welcome to remain for the duration of this hearing. Thank you, Your Honor. She took her seat, pinned the medal back on, didn't look at anyone. Brennan turned to Dana Clifton. Counselor, do you have any further objections regarding Ms. Donovan's presence? Clifton looked like she wanted to object to the existence of oxygen. No, Your Honor. Good. Let's proceed. But the hearing didn't proceed, because at that exact moment Kenneth Walsh stood up, swaying slightly, and pressed a hand to his chest. I don't, he started. Then he collapsed. Everything happened fast. Aaron Bryce lunged forward, catching Walsh before he hit the floor. The bailiff shouted something. Dana Clifton jumped back, knocking her chair over. And Claire vaulted the gallery gate, crossed the courtroom in 4 strides, and dropped to her knees beside Walsh. Her hands moved on autopilot, fingers to his neck, checking pulse, pressing an ear to his chest, listening, lifting his eyelid, checking pupil response. "He's in V-fib," she said, voice calm and clinical. "Someone call 911, now." The bailiff grabbed his radio. "Medical emergency, courtroom 3. Claire was already moving. She ripped open Walsh's oversized jacket, yanked his shirt up, and started compressions. Hard, fast, precise. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Repeat. "Does this building have an AED?" she demanded. I think." "Find it. Go." The bailiff ran. Commander Hayes knelt across from her. "What do you need?" "Keep his airway clear. Tilt his head back." Hayes moved into position. Claire kept compressions going, counting under her breath, her entire focus narrowed to the man dying in front of her. Marcus Brennan stood frozen behind the bench, gavel still in hand. Dana Clifton stared, white-faced. Aaron Bryce backed away, giving them room. And in the gallery, someone whispered, "Jesus Christ, she knows what she's doing." 2 minutes felt like 2 hours. Claire's arms burned. Sweat ran down her temple. But she didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept the rhythm, kept Walsh's blood moving, kept him alive. The bailiff crashed back through the doors, AED in hand. "Here!" Claire grabbed it, ripped open the case, and pulled out the pads. "Cut his shirt." Hayes produced a pocket knife, sliced through Walsh's undershirt in one motion. Claire slapped the pads onto his chest, one high right, one low left. The AED's robotic voice filled the courtroom, analyzing rhythm. "Do not touch the patient." Everyone froze, shock advised, charging. Claire's hand hovered over the button. "Press the flashing button to deliver shock." She pressed it. Walsh's body jerked. The AED beeped. Shock delivered. "Begin CPR." Claire's hands were back on his chest immediately, compressions resuming without missing a beat. 30. Breathe. 30. Breathe. The AED analyzed again, shock advised. She hit the button. Another jolt, another round of CPR. And then, Walsh gasped. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and terrified. His chest rose and fell on its own. Claire checked his pulse. Steady. Weak, but steady. "He's back," she said quietly. Sirens wailed outside. Paramedics burst through the doors 30 seconds later, rolling a stretcher, radios crackling. Claire stood, stepped back, and let them take over. She gave them a rapid-fire report, vitals, interventions, timeline. They nodded, loaded Walsh onto the stretcher, and wheeled him out. The courtroom was silent. Claire stood in the middle of the floor, blood on her hands, scrubs twisted, breathing hard. Commander Hayes looked at her with something close to awe. That was textbook. That was muscle memory, Claire said. Marcus Brennan slowly sank into his chair. He looked 10 years older than he had 15 minutes ago. Dana Clifton hadn't moved. She was still standing behind her table, file forgotten, staring at Claire like she'd just witnessed a resurrection. Aaron Bryce broke the silence. "Your Honor, I think we should adjourn." Brennan nodded mutely. "Continued pending Mr. Walsh's recovery. Court is in recess." The gavel came down. People started moving, murmuring, gathering their things. But no one approached Claire. She stood alone in the center of the courtroom, surrounded by people who'd watched her get humiliated, then watched her save a man's life, and now had no idea what to say to her. Commander Hayes stepped close. "You should go." "I know. I mean it. Before someone asks you questions you don't want to answer." Claire looked at him. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I just made some calls." He paused. "You did the rest." She turned and walked toward the doors. This time no one stopped her. But as she reached the exit, Marcus Brennan's voice cut through the noise. "Ms. Donovan." She stopped. Didn't turn around. "I was wrong," he said. Claire glanced back over her shoulder. Brennan was standing now, hands braced on the bench, looking at her with an expression that might have been regret. "I misjudged you," he continued, "and I apologize." Claire nodded once. Apology accepted. Then she pushed through the doors and disappeared into the hallway. Behind her, the courtroom exploded into whispered conversation. Phones came out. Someone was already typing furiously, probably texting a reporter, maybe posting to social media. The story was getting out, and there was nothing Claire could do to stop it. She made it to her car before the shaking started. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the keys. Her breath came short and fast. She gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, and forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, count to 4, hold, repeat. The panic attack passed slowly. Always did. She'd had them since Kandahar, since the convoy ambush that left her with a purple heart, and nightmares that still woke her at 3 a.m. some nights, gasping for air, reaching for gear she didn't wear anymore. But she was good at managing them now, good at finding quiet places, good at keeping her face neutral until the storm passed. 10 minutes later, she started the engine and pulled out of the courthouse parking lot. Her phone buzzed. Text from Maplewood General. "You coming in for your shift tonight?" Claire stared at the message. She was supposed to clock in at 7 p.m. Another 12 hours in the ER. More overdoses, more traumas, more saves. She typed back, "Yes," because that was what she did now. She saved people, one shift at a time, one patient at a time. Quietly, without medals, without recognition. That was the deal she'd made with herself when she left the military. No more spotlights, no more ceremonies, no more eyes on her, just the work. But as she drove through Ridgefield's quiet streets, past the library and the post office and the diner, where she sometimes grabbed coffee, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something had just broken open. That phone call Commander Hayes mentioned, someone in the courtroom who knew her name, who knew her unit, who made the call that brought Hayes running. Who and why? And she pulled into the parking lot of Maplewood General, parked in her usual spot near the ambulance bay, and sat for a moment in silence. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. The message was short. "We need to talk. It's about Walsh and about what really happened in Kandahar." Claire stared at the screen. Her heart kicked once, hard, against her ribs. She deleted the message, pocketed the phone, and walked into the hospital. But she knew, somewhere deep in her gut where instinct lived, that this wasn't over. Not even close. The ER was slammed by the time Claire walked through the automatic doors at 6:53 p.m. Ambulance sirens wailed outside. A teenager with a compound fracture was screaming in Bay 4. Someone had vomited in the waiting room. The triage nurse looked up, saw Claire, and her shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank God, we're drowning." Claire clocked in, grabbed a fresh pair of gloves, and dove straight into the chaos. A diabetic crisis, a suspected stroke, a construction worker with a nail through his hand who kept insisting he was fine. She worked methodically, efficiently, moving from patient to patient with the same calm focus she'd used on Kenneth Walsh's chest compressions 6 hours earlier. No one here knew what had happened at the courthouse. No one asked why she looked more exhausted than usual. They just needed her hands, her training, her ability to stay steady when everything else was falling apart. That was enough. By 9:30 p.m., the rush had slowed to a manageable crawl. Claire was charting notes on a pneumonia patient when Dr. Richard Castellano, the ER attending, appeared at her elbow. "You okay?" She looked up. "Fine." "Why?" "You've been here since yesterday morning. That's almost 30 hours. "I'm aware." "Claire." His voice softened. "You're allowed to go home." "I'm good." Castellano studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. He knew better than to push. Claire Donovan worked more shifts than anyone else in the department, picked up every extra hour offered, and never once complained. She was reliable, unshakable. The kind of nurse you wanted in the room when everything went wrong. He walked away, leaving her to her charts. Claire finished the notes, filed them, and was heading toward the break room when her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Different from the first. She almost ignored it. Almost. But something made her stop in the empty hallway, pull out the phone, and open the message. "Walsh's stable. St. Catherine's ICU. But someone's asking questions about you. Thought you should know. Hayes." Claire stared at the screen. Questions. About her. She typed back, "What kind of questions?" The response came 30 seconds later. The kind that dig into classified ops. "Be careful." Claire deleted both messages, pocketed the phone, and stood there for a long moment, jaw tight. Classified ops. She'd known this might happen eventually, known that wearing the medal, showing up in that courtroom, putting herself in front of people who had access to databases and records, it was always going to be a risk. But she'd done it anyway, because Kenneth Walsh needed someone. Now that decision was coming back around. She pushed through the break room doors, poured a cup of burnt coffee, and sat down at the small table in the corner. The room was empty except for a resident asleep on the couch, still in his scrubs, one arm thrown over his face. Claire pulled out her phone again, opened her contacts, scrolled past names she called regularly, hospital admin, a few coworkers, her landlord, and stopped on one she hadn't touched in 3 years. Captain Nora Vance, former CO. Last person Claire had spoken to before she left the service. Her thumb hovered over the name. Then she put the phone down. Not yet. She drank the coffee, tasting nothing, and tried to convince herself that Hayes was being paranoid, that nobody cared about a nurse in Colorado who'd saved a veteran's life, that the story would die in 24 hours, buried under the next news cycle. But she didn't believe it, because she knew how these things worked. Once people started asking questions, they didn't stop until they got answers, and some of the answers buried in her service record weren't the kind anyone was supposed to find. The break room door opened. Castellano stuck his head in. "Donovan, trauma incoming. MVC, multiple casualties. We need you." Claire stood, dumped the coffee, and followed him out. Work. That was something she could control. The motor vehicle collision had happened on Route 34, just outside Ridgefield city limits. A pickup truck had crossed the median and hit a minivan head-on. The truck driver was DOA. The minivan had 3 passengers, a mother, father, and their 8-year-old son. The father arrived first, unconscious, bleeding from a head wound. Claire and 2 other nurses worked on him while Castellano barked orders. They got him stabilized, intubated, and rushed to surgery. The mother came in next, screaming for her son, both legs broken, pelvis fractured. Claire held her hand while another team worked, trying to keep her calm, trying to stop her from moving and making everything worse. "Where's Ethan? Where's my son?" "He's coming. They're bringing him now. I need to see him." "Ma'am, you need to stay still. We're helping you." "Ethan!" The woman thrashed, eyes wild with terror. Claire pressed her shoulder down gently but firmly, maintaining eye contact, voice steady. "I promise you, the moment he gets here, I will bring him to you. But right now, you need to let us do our job so you can be there for him, okay?" The woman's eyes locked onto Claire's. Something in that gaze, the absolute certainty, the unshakable calm, cut through the panic. She stopped fighting. "Okay," she whispered. Claire stayed with her until the surgical team arrived to take her upstairs. Then she scrubbed out, changed gloves, and moved to the next bay. The boy, Ethan, was already there. He was small for 8, thin, dark hair matted with blood. His left arm was broken, bone visible through torn skin. But he was conscious, which was something. Castellano was examining him, checking pupil response, palpating his abdomen. "Possible internal bleeding. Get me a CT scan. Stat." Claire moved to the boy's right side, took his good hand. "Hey, Ethan, I'm Claire. You're doing great." He looked at her, eyes glassy with shock. "Where's my mom?" "She's here. She's okay. Your dad, too." "I want my mom." "I know, buddy. We're going to take you to see her as soon as we make sure you're okay. Can you do that for me?" He nodded, tears running down his dirty face. Claire held his hand while they ran tests, prepped him for imaging, stabilized his arm. She didn't let go once. Not when he cried, not when he squeezed her fingers so hard they went numb. 40 minutes later, the CT came back clear. No internal bleeding, no brain trauma, just a broken arm and some bad bruising. Miracle, really. They set his arm, cleaned him up, and brought him to his mother's room. The reunion was loud, messy, full of tears and relief. Claire stood in the doorway, watching, feeling something twist in her chest. She'd seen this before. Families torn apart, families barely held together. The thin line between tragedy and survival. That was the job. But tonight, watching that mother clutch her son while her husband was in surgery fighting for his life, Claire felt the weight of every save she'd ever made. Every life she'd pulled back from the edge, and every one she hadn't. She turned and walked back to the nurse's station, logged the case, and checked the board for her next assignment. 10:47 p.m. Still 3 hours left in her shift. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, expecting another message from Hayes. It wasn't. It was a notification from a local news site. The headline stopped her cold. Decorated veteran saves life in courthouse after being publicly humiliated by judge. Beneath it, a grainy photo. Claire, kneeling beside Kenneth Walsh, hands on his chest, AED pads visible. Someone had taken a picture. Claire's stomach dropped. She clicked the article, skimmed it. The details were accurate, maybe too accurate. Someone had talked. Probably multiple someones. The story outlined the entire hearing, Judge Brennan's dismissal, Dana Clifton's accusations, Commander Hayes' intervention, and Claire's life-saving response. It even mentioned her unit, her deployments, her medals. Her anonymity was gone. By morning, this would be everywhere. Claire closed the app, shoved the phone back in her pocket, and pressed her palms against the desk, breathing carefully. She'd known. She'd known this could happen, but knowing and experiencing were different animals. "Hey!" She looked up. Castellano was standing there, concern etched across his face. "You see the article?" Claire nodded. "People are going to start asking questions." "I know." "Are you ready for that?" "No." Castellano leaned against the desk. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing." "Doesn't feel like it." "It never does." He paused. "Look, I don't know what you did before you came here. Don't need to, but whatever it was, it made you one hell of a nurse. Don't let anyone take that from you." Claire met his eyes. "Thanks." He nodded and walked away. She finished her shift in a haze. More patients, more charts, more crises managed and contained. By 1 a.m., she was running on fumes, exhaustion digging into her bones. But she didn't go home. Instead, she drove to St. Catherine's Hospital on the north side of Ridgefield, found the ICU, showed her hospital badge to the charge nurse and asked about Kenneth Walsh. "He's stable," the nurse said. "Family only, though." "I'm the one who kept him alive until the paramedics got there." The nurse hesitated, then softened. "Room 412, but only 5 minutes." Claire walked down the quiet hallway, past machines beeping in steady rhythm, and stopped outside Walsh's room. He was asleep. Monitors tracked his vitals. An IV drip fed into his arm. He looked small in the hospital bed, fragile, nothing like the man who'd sat in that courtroom determined to defend his honor. Claire stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him breathe. Then she turned to leave. "Claire?" She stopped, looked back. Walsh's eyes were open, barely. But he was looking at her. "You saved my life," he said, voice hoarse. "I did my job." "You did more than that." He swallowed, wincing. "They told me what happened, after I passed out, what you did." "It's okay." "No." Walsh's hand moved weakly toward her. "It's not. You didn't have to be there, didn't have to help me, but you did. And now you're all over the news because of me." Claire stepped closer. "That's not your fault. Feels like it." "Well, it's not." She pulled a chair over, sat down. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." He tried to smile. Failed. "They said it was my heart, V-fib, whatever that means. Ventricular fibrillation. Your heart stopped beating correctly. If we hadn't shocked you back, you would have died." Walsh was quiet for a moment. "I should have died in that courtroom." "But you didn't." "Why?" "Because I was there." "Why were you there?" Claire looked at him, really looked, saw the confusion, the guilt, the quiet shame of a man who'd spent too long believing he didn't deserve help. "Because I've been where you are," she said quietly, "and I know what it's like when nobody shows up." Walsh's eyes filled. He looked away, blinking hard. "The charges," he said after a moment. "Did they drop them?" "I don't know yet, but I'll find out. I can't go through that again." "You won't have to." "How do you know?" "Because I'm not leaving until this is over." Walsh looked at her again. "Why would you do that?" Claire stood, adjusted his blanket, checked the IV line. "Because you're not alone anymore, okay?" He nodded, tears running silently down his face. Claire left before he could say anything else. She walked back through the ICU, through the lobby, out into the cold night air. Her car was where she'd left it, parked under a flickering streetlight. She climbed in, locked the doors, and sat there. Her phone buzzed. She didn't want to look. Didn't want to see another message, another news alert, another piece of her past dragged into the present. But she looked anyway. This time it was a video file. No message. Just the file. Claire's finger hovered over it. Then she pressed play. The video was shaky, filmed on someone's phone from the back of the courtroom. It showed her kneeling beside Walsh. showed her doing compressions, showed Commander Hayes helping, the AED shocking, Walsh's body jerking, and it showed her face focused, calm, completely in control, while everyone else stood frozen. The video ended. Beneath it, a caption had been added by whoever posted it. "This is what a hero looks like. Share this." The view count was already at 43,000. Claire closed the app, dropped the phone in the cup holder, and pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. She'd spent 8 years trying to disappear. 8 years building a quiet life where nobody knew her name or asked about her scars. And in one morning, it had all come undone. A sec. She finally drove home around 2:30 a.m. Her apartment was a small one-bedroom on the second floor of a converted house on Maple Street. Cheap rent, decent landlord, walking distance to a coffee shop that opened early. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She unlocked the door, dropped her keys on the counter, and kicked off her shoes. The apartment was dark, cold, exactly the way she'd left it yesterday morning before her shift. Had it only been yesterday? It felt like a week. Claire turned on the light, filled a glass with water, and sat down at the small kitchen table. Her phone sat next to her, screen dark, but she could feel it. The weight of all those messages, notifications, people reaching out. She didn't want to look, but she had to. She picked up the phone, unlocked it, and opened her messages. 47 unread texts, most from numbers she didn't recognize. A few from coworkers who'd seen the article. One from her landlord asking if she was okay. She scrolled through them, reading quickly, deleting most. Then she stopped. One message stood out. Sent 20 minutes ago. Claire. "It's Nora Vance. Call me. It's urgent." Claire stared at the name. Captain Nora Vance. Her former CO. The woman who'd signed off on her discharge paperwork, who told her she was making a mistake leaving the service, who'd promised to stay in touch, and then hadn't. 3 years of silence. And now this. Claire looked at the clock. 2:47 a.m. Too late to call. Or too early, depending on how you looked at it. She set the phone down, drank the water, and tried to convince herself she could sleep. But her mind was racing. Walsh in the ICU. The article spreading, the video going viral. Nora Vance reaching out after years of nothing. And that first message, the one from the unknown number. It's about what really happened in Kandahar. Kandahar. Claire closed her eyes, but the memories came anyway. Desert heat, gunfire echoing off compound walls, blood soaking into sand. A soldier screaming her name while she worked on another casualty, hands slick with gore, knowing she couldn't save them both. She'd chosen. Saved one, lost the other, made the call medics aren't supposed to make, and lived with it ever since. Claire opened her eyes, stood, and walked to the bedroom. She didn't bother changing out of her scrubs, just collapsed onto the bed, still wearing her shoes, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. At 4:15 a.m., her phone rang. She grabbed it, saw Nora Vance's name on the screen, and answered. "Captain?" "Claire." Vance's voice was sharp, clipped, all business. "We need to talk." "It's 4 in the morning." "I'm aware. This can't wait." Claire sat up, rubbing her face. "What's going on?" "You showed up in a civilian courtroom wearing your Bronze Star and ended up all over the news." "I know. Do you know who's paying attention?" Hayes said someone was asking questions. "Someone is doing more than asking. DOD flagged your file this afternoon. Red flagged it." Claire went still. "Why?" "Because your service record is partially classified, and now reporters are digging, which means they're going to start hitting walls, which means they're going to start asking why. And when they do, this gets complicated fast." "I didn't tell anyone anything." "You didn't have to. You stood up in public wearing medals tied to operations that are still under seal. That's enough." Claire stood, pacing the small bedroom. "So what do I do?" "Nothing." "You say nothing. If anyone asks, you refer them to me. Do not engage with press. Do not answer questions about your deployments. Do not—" "I'm not an idiot, Captain." Vance paused. "I know. But you're also not military anymore. You don't have the protections you used to. And if this escalates, you're going to be exposed." "To what?" "To people who want to know why a combat medic with a spotless record suddenly left the service 8 years ago without explanation." Claire's jaw tightened. "That's classified." "It is, for now. But classifications get declassified, files get leaked, people talk. Vance's voice softened slightly. Claire, I'm trying to protect you, but you need to stay quiet and let this blow over. What if it doesn't? Then we'll deal with it. But right now, you need to disappear. Claire laughed bitterly. Little late for that. I'm serious. Take a few days off. Don't go to the courthouse. Don't visit Walsh. Let the story die. I can't do that. Why not? Because Walsh is alone, and someone needs to make sure his case gets resolved. Claire, I'm not abandoning him. Vance was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. You always were stubborn. Learned from the best. Fine. Do what you're going to do. But if this goes sideways, don't say I didn't warn you. Noted. And Claire? Yeah? Be careful. You don't know who's watching. The line went dead. Claire stood in her dark bedroom, phone still pressed to her ear, Vance's words echoing. You don't know who's watching. She walked to the window, pulled back the curtain, and looked out at the quiet street below. A car was parked across from her building. Engine off, lights off, someone sitting in the driver's seat. Claire's pulse kicked up. She let the curtain fall, stepped back, and grabbed her phone. Dialed Hayes. He answered on the second ring. Donovan, there's someone outside my apartment. What? Black sedan. Been sitting there for at least 10 minutes. Hayes swore. Stay inside. Lock your doors. I'm sending someone. Who? Just stay put. He hung up. Claire moved away from the window, locked the deadbolt, checked the back door. Her hands weren't shaking. Training had kicked in. Assess. Adapt. Act. She grabbed a kitchen knife from the drawer. Not much, but better than nothing. Then she sat down at the table, knife beside her, and waited. 15 minutes crawled by. Then headlights swept across her window. A second car pulled up behind the sedan. Claire moved to the window, staying to the side, and watched. 2 men got out of the second car. Military posture. One of them knocked on the sedan's window. The driver got out, hands raised, talking, explaining. The military guys weren't buying it. One of them pulled out a phone, made a call. 5 minutes later, the sedan drove away. Claire's phone buzzed. Hayes. You're clear. He was a reporter. Won't be back. Claire exhaled slowly, set the knife down, and sank into the chair. A reporter. Staking out her apartment at 4 a.m., this wasn't blowing over. This was just getting started. She looked at her phone, saw the time, 5:03 a.m. No point trying to sleep now. She made coffee, sat at the table, and opened her laptop. Searched her own name. The results made her stomach turn. Dozens of articles. Hundreds of social media posts. The video had been shared over 200,000 times. People were calling her a hero, calling for Judge Brennan to resign, demanding justice for Kenneth Walsh. And buried in the comments, questions. What unit was she with? What operations? Why did she leave the military? Claire closed the laptop. She'd wanted to help one veteran, one man who needed someone in his corner. Instead, she'd opened a door she couldn't close. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Silence, then breathing. Who is this? Claire demanded. A voice, male, quiet, familiar in a way that made her skin crawl. You shouldn't have come back, Ghost Angel. The line went dead. Claire sat frozen, phone still at her ear, blood roaring in her ears. Ghost Angel. That was her call sign. The name soldiers had given her in Kandahar, whispered in the dark after firefights, passed along through units like a legend. Nobody outside the military knew that name, nobody except the people she'd served with. And one of them had just called her. Claire sat at her kitchen table, phone still gripped in her hand, the silence after that voice more deafening than any explosion she'd survived overseas. Ghost Angel. Nobody had called her that in 8 years. Not since the night everything went wrong in Kandahar province, when she'd made a choice that saved 3 lives and destroyed her own. She set the phone down slowly, hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Training kicked in automatically. Assess the threat, identify the variables, control what you can control. Someone from her past had found her, someone who knew the call sign, knew what it meant, and knew exactly how to rattle her. The question was why now? She stood, paced to the window, checked the street. Empty. The military guys Hayes sent were gone. The reporter was gone. Just pre-dawn darkness and a street that looked exactly like it should at 5:17 a.m. But Claire couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She grabbed her laptop, pulled up a secure browser, and logged into a military veterans network she'd avoided for years. Her profile was bare. Name, rank, discharge date, nothing else. No photo, no service details, no connections. She typed Ghost Angel into the search bar. 3 results. The first was a forum post from 2019, someone asking if anyone remembered a medic who'd served with SEAL teams in Afghanistan. No responses. The second was a memorial page for Lieutenant Danny Walsh, Kenneth's son, killed in action February 2018. The page mentioned a medic who'd kept him alive long enough to say goodbye to his father over satellite phone. No name given. The third result made Claire's blood run cold. It was a news article from yesterday, posted 6 hours after the courthouse incident. Headline, Ghost Angel Returns. Combat. Medic's secret identity revealed in Colorado courtroom. The article had details no reporter should have had. Her unit designation, her deployments, specific operations she'd been attached to, operations that were still classified, and it named her call sign. Someone had leaked her file. Claire scrolled down, looking for the byline. No author listed, just special investigative report. She closed the laptop, mind racing. The phone call, the leak, the timing. None of it was coincidence. Someone wanted her exposed. Someone wanted her past dragged into the light. But why? Her phone buzzed. Text from Hayes. We need to meet. Now. Diner on Route 9. Come alone. Claire grabbed her keys, pulled on a jacket over her scrubs, and was out the door in 30 seconds. The drive took 12 minutes. Route 9 was mostly empty at this hour, just a few long-haul trucks and early shift workers heading toward Ridgefield's industrial district. The diner, Rosie's, according to the neon sign that had lost its apostrophe sometime in the previous decade, sat alone in a gravel parking lot, windows glowing against the dark. Claire parked, scanned the lot, and spotted Hayes' truck near the back exit. She walked in. The place smelled like burnt coffee and hash browns. A tired waitress behind the counter didn't look up. Hayes sat in a corner booth, back to the wall, facing the entrance. Claire slid in across from him. You look like hell, he said. It's been a long night. Hayes pushed a folder across the table. This showed up at my office 2 hours ago. No return address, no note. Claire opened it. Inside were photocopies. Her service record, her medical evaluations, her discharge paperwork, and a classified after-action report from Kandahar province dated February 23, 2018, the report she'd spent 8 years trying to forget. Where did you get this? She asked quietly. I didn't. Someone sent it to me. Same person who leaked your file to that news site, I'm guessing. Claire flipped through the pages, scanning details she knew by heart. The convoy ambush, the casualty count, the decision she'd made under fire, the investigation that followed. Why? She said. Why dig this up now? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Hayes leaned forward. Claire, someone wants to destroy you, or expose you, maybe both, and they're using Kenneth Walsh as the catalyst. Walsh has nothing to do with this. Doesn't matter. You showed up for him. You put yourself in public. That made you visible, and someone was waiting for that. Claire looked up. Who? I don't know yet. But whoever it is has access to classified military records and the resources to move fast. He paused. Do you have enemies? Someone from your unit? Someone who might have a grudge? Claire thought about the names, the faces, the people she'd served with, saved, failed. Maybe, she said slowly, but I don't know why they'd wait 8 years. Maybe they didn't know where you were until now. The waitress appeared with coffee neither of them had ordered. She filled 2 cups, left the pot, and disappeared. Hayes wrapped his hands around his mug. There's something else. Kenneth Walsh's son, Danny, he was KIA in 2018, same month as your discharge. I know. You were there. Yes. The report mentions a combat medic who made a controversial call during a firefight, prioritized one casualty over another. Both soldiers died anyway. Hayes met her eyes. That was you, wasn't it? Claire didn't answer. Claire, Danny Walsh and Sergeant Marcus Reeves. February 23rd, IED strike followed by small arms fire. Both casualties critical. I had 30 seconds to make a choice. Her voice was flat, clinical. I chose Danny because his injuries were survivable. Marcus had a sucking chest wound and internal bleeding. I couldn't save them both. And? Marcus died in 4 minutes. Danny lasted 20, long enough for his father to hear his voice one last time. She met Hayes' eyes. I made the call. I stand by it, and I've lived with it every day since. Hayes was quiet for a moment. The report says you were cleared of wrongdoing. Technically. What does that mean? It means the brass decided I followed protocol, made the medically sound choice, did everything by the book. Claire's jaw tightened. But Marcus's family didn't see it that way. His brother filed a formal complaint, accused me of letting Marcus die because Danny's father had connections, said I chose politics over soldiers. That's insane. Is it? Claire leaned back. Kenneth Walsh is a decorated veteran, Medal of Honor recipient. His son was serving with an elite unit. Marcus Reeves was a regular enlisted guy from Ohio with no family in the military. Who do you think the story favored? Hayes stared at her. You were investigated? For 6 months. They interviewed everyone, reviewed every decision I'd made in theater, tore apart my service record looking for bias. She paused. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. I made the call based on medical assessment, not politics. But the damage was done. So you left? So I left. Claire drank her coffee. It tasted like rust. Because I couldn't stay in a job where every decision I made would be second-guessed, where soldiers would look at me and wonder if I'd let them die to save someone more important. That's not fair. Fair doesn't exist in combat. Hayes rubbed his face. Okay. So Marcus Reeves's family. They have motive. Who else? Anyone who served with Marcus? Anyone who believed the complaint? Claire thought for a moment. His brother, Eric Reeves, he was vocal about it. Showed up at the hearing, made threats. What kind of threats? The kind that got him escorted out by MPs, but nothing that crossed the line legally. Hayes pulled out his phone, started typing. I'll run his name, see what comes up. It's been 8 years, Commander. If Eric wanted revenge, he's had plenty of time. Or maybe he's been waiting for the right moment, for you to surface somewhere visible. Hayes looked up. You saved Kenneth Walsh in a public courtroom, the father of the soldier you chose to save over Eric's brother. That's not just visible, that's symbolic. Claire went still. Hayes saw it. What? The phone call, she said slowly. The one that brought you to the courthouse. You said someone called about me. Someone who knew my unit. Yeah. Who? They didn't say. Just that you were being mistreated and I needed to verify your service. Man or woman? Hayes frowned, thinking. Man, mid-30s maybe. Spoke like military, but I didn't recognize the voice. Claire's mind was racing now. And the article that leaked my call sign, it went live 6 hours after the courthouse incident. Too fast for a regular investigation. Someone had that information ready to go. You think they planned this? I think someone's been watching me, waiting for me to make contact with Kenneth Walsh. And when I did, they pulled the trigger. But why? What's the endgame? Claire didn't answer immediately. She was putting pieces together, running scenarios, testing theories against what she knew. Then it clicked. They want Walsh's case thrown out, she said. Hayes blinked. What? Think about it. Kenneth Walsh is on trial for selling his son's medals. But if his son's death becomes controversial, if the medic who kept him alive gets accused of misconduct, then Walsh's grief becomes justified. His actions become understandable, maybe even forgivable. So they're using you to help him? No, they're using me to hurt him. Claire leaned forward. If my service gets called into question, if the investigation gets reopened, then everything about Danny Walsh's death comes under scrutiny, including why Kenneth Walsh has been selling the medals. Was it financial desperation, or was it because he blames the military for his son's death? For putting his son with a medic who made controversial calls? Hayes' expression darkened. That's a hell of a reach. Is it? Walsh's public defender is overwhelmed. The prosecutor wants a conviction. The judge wants the case closed. Nobody's looking at the bigger picture. Claire's voice hardened. But if I get dragged through the mud, if my past becomes the story, then Kenneth Walsh becomes collateral damage. His case gets buried. his reputation gets destroyed, and whoever's behind this gets exactly what they want. Which is? I don't know yet. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone again. I'm calling JAG. We need someone who can dig into this properly. No. Claire, if we bring in official channels, this becomes an investigation. Files get opened, people get questioned, and Walsh gets caught in the middle. She shook her head. I'm not doing that to him. Then what do you suggest? I find out who's doing this, and I stop them. How? Claire stood. By doing what I do best. Showing up where I'm needed. Hayes grabbed her wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop her. You're walking into a trap. I know. They want you visible. They want you making moves. Every step you take gives them ammunition. Then I'll make sure every step counts. Claire pulled free gently. Thank you for the warning, Commander, but this is my fight now. Donovan, I'm done hiding. She walked out of the diner before he could argue. The sun was rising by the time Claire got back to her apartment. Gold light spilled across Ridgefield's streets, washing away shadows, making everything look clean and new. A lie, really. The darkness was still there, just hidden better. She went inside, showered, changed into fresh clothes, jeans, a plain black shirt, boots. No scrubs today. She wasn't going to the hospital. She was going to war. Her laptop sat on the table where she'd left it. Claire opened it, pulled up the news article again, and started digging. The site was small, independent, not affiliated with any major outlet. The domain registration was private, no contact information, no about page. She ran a reverse image search on the photos used in the article. Most were pulled from public sources, her hospital, the courthouse. But one image stood out. A photo of her in combat gear, face partially obscured by a helmet, kneeling beside a wounded soldier. That photo had never been public. Someone had pulled it from a classified operation file. Claire downloaded the image, ran it through metadata analysis. The file had been modified recently, 3 days ago, but the original timestamp was from 2018. February 2018, Kandahar Province. The same operation where Marcus Reeves died. Claire sat back, pieces clicking together faster now. Someone had accessed classified files. Someone with high-level clearance. Someone who knew exactly where to look and what to leak. Not Eric Reeves. He wouldn't have that kind of access. But someone in the military would. Someone who'd been involved in the investigation. Someone who'd never believed Claire was innocent. She pulled up the names from the hearing. Officers who'd questioned her. JAG lawyers who'd reviewed the case. Medical personnel who'd examined her decisions. One name jumped out. Major Philip Granger. Army JAG. Lead investigator on the Kandahar incident. He'd been relentless during the hearing, pushing harder than anyone else, convinced Claire had made a politically motivated choice. The final report had cleared her, but Granger had filed a dissenting opinion, argued that the investigation had been incomplete, that Claire's service should be reviewed further. The brass had ignored him, but that didn't mean he'd let it go. Claire ran Granger's name through the Veterans Network, found his current assignment. Fort Carson, Colorado. Less than 2 hours from Ridgefield. She checked the timeline. Granger had been stationed there for 6 months. Plenty of time to learn Claire was working in Ridgefield. Plenty of time to put a plan together. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. Who is this? You're getting close. The same voice from earlier, male, calm, but not close enough. Granger? A pause. Smart. I always said you were smart. Claire's hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? Justice. For Marcus Reeves. For every soldier who trusted you and got a medic who played favorites. That's not what happened. Isn't it? You chose Danny Walsh because his father was important, because it looked better, because you cared more about your career than doing what was right. I chose Danny because he had a survivable injury. Marcus didn't. You don't know that. I was there. You weren't. I read the reports. I interviewed witnesses. And I know what really happened that day. Granger's voice hardened. You let Marcus Reeves die, and you've been hiding from that truth ever since. If you believe that, then charge me. Reopen the investigation. Go through official channels. Oh, I plan to, but first, I'm going to make sure everyone knows who you really are. The celebrated hero, the ghost angel. He laughed bitterly. You're about to become the most hated medic in military history. Why involve Kenneth Walsh? Because his son is part of your story. And when people learn you let one soldier die to save another, they're going to ask questions. Like why Kenneth Walsh has been selling his son's medals. Like whether he ever forgave you for that choice. He doesn't even know I was there. He will soon. Granger paused. I've already contacted him, told him who you are, what you did. By now, he's probably wondering why you showed up in that courtroom, whether it was guilt, whether you thought you could fix what you broke. Claire's chest tightened. You're destroying an innocent man to get to me. I'm exposing the truth. What happens after that isn't my problem. The line went dead. Claire stood, grabbed her keys, and ran for the door. She drove to St. Catherine's Hospital faster than she should have, barely slowing for red lights, ignoring speed limits. If Granger had contacted Kenneth Walsh, if he'd told him about Kandahar, about Danny, about the choice Claire made, she skidded into the parking lot, abandoned her car in a fire lane, and sprinted inside. The ICU was on the 3rd floor. Claire took the stairs, burst through the doors, and nearly collided with a nurse. Room 412, Claire gasped. Kenneth Walsh, is he? The nurse's expression said everything. Claire ran. Walsh's room was empty. The bed was made. The monitors were silent. His chart was gone. Claire grabbed a passing doctor. Where's Walsh? Kenneth Walsh, room 412. He checked himself out an hour ago, against medical advice. Where did he go? He didn't say, just signed the paperwork and left. Claire pulled out her phone, tried the number Walsh had given her 2 days ago. It went straight to voicemail. She called Hayes. I need you to find Kenneth Walsh, now. Granger got to him, told him about Kandahar. He's gone. Claire, slow down. There's no time. Granger's planning something, and Walsh is the target. What kind of something? I don't know, but I think... Claire stopped. Her blood ran cold. The courthouse. Walsh has a hearing today, the continuation from yesterday. What time? 10 a.m. Claire checked her watch. 8:47 a.m. I'm going there now. Wait for me. No time. She hung up, ran back to her car, and drove straight to Summit County Courthouse. The parking lot was fuller than yesterday. News vans had shown up. Reporters stood outside, cameras ready. The story had grown overnight. Everyone wanted to see what happened next. Claire parked, pulled her hood up, and pushed through the crowd. Nobody recognized her. Not yet. She made it inside through security, up to the 2nd floor. Courtroom 3 was already filling up. More spectators than yesterday. More press. More eyes. Claire scanned the room. No sign of Walsh. She checked her phone. 9:23 a.m. Maybe he wasn't coming. Maybe he'd decided to run instead of facing this. Then the doors opened and Kenneth Walsh walked in. He looked worse than he had in the ICU. Pale, shaking, eyes hollow. He moved like someone who'd been gutted and left standing. He saw Claire immediately. Their eyes met across the courtroom, and Claire saw it. The knowledge, the betrayal, the pain. Granger had told him everything. Walsh looked away, took a seat beside Aaron Bryce, and stared at the table. Claire stayed in the gallery, pulse hammering. At exactly 10 a.m., Judge Marcus Brennan entered. Everyone stood. Brennan looked different today. Subdued, careful. Yesterday's arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like caution. Be seated, he said quietly. The courtroom settled. Brennan opened the file. We're here to continue the hearing for Kenneth Walsh, charged with illegal sale of military property. Before we proceed, I want to address something. He looked directly at Walsh. Mr. Walsh, I understand you checked yourself out of the hospital against medical advice. Are you well enough to continue? Walsh's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Are you sure? I just want this over. Brennan nodded slowly. Very well. Ms. Clifton, does the prosecution wish to proceed? Dana Clifton stood, but before she could speak, the courtroom doors opened. Major Philip Granger walked in, dressed in full Army uniform, ribbons and rank insignia visible. Every head turned. Brennan frowned. Can I help you, Major? Your Honor, I'm Major Philip Granger, Army JAG. I have information pertinent to this case. This is a civilian proceeding, Major. Unless you've been called as a witness, I have evidence that directly impacts the credibility of a key figure in this case. Granger's eyes moved to Claire. Specifically, Claire Donovan. The courtroom erupted. Brennan slammed his gavel. Order! Major Granger, you can't simply walk in here. I have documentation proving Ms. Donovan was involved in a controversial combat incident in 2018. An incident that resulted in the death of a soldier she chose not to treat. Granger pulled out a folder. That soldier was Marcus Reeves. The man Ms. Donovan did choose to treat was Danny Walsh, Kenneth Walsh's son. Every eye in the courtroom locked onto Claire. Walsh turned in his seat, staring at her. Claire stood slowly. Your Honor. Sit down, Ms. Donovan, Brennan said sharply. This is a setup. I said sit down. Claire sat. Granger continued. Your Honor, I believe Ms. Donovan's presence in this courtroom was not coincidental. I believe she sought out Kenneth Walsh as an attempt to assuage her own guilt over the controversial decision she made that cost Marcus Reeves his life. That's a lie, Claire said, standing again. Is it? Then explain why you never told Mr. Walsh who you were, why you never mentioned you were the medic who kept his son alive while another soldier died. Walsh was staring at her now, face pale, eyes wide. Mr. Walsh, Granger said quietly, did you know Miss Donovan was your son's combat medic? Walsh's voice broke. No. Did you know she was there when Danny died? No. Did you know she made a choice between your son and another soldier, and that soldier, Marcus Reeves, died because of that choice? Objection! Aaron Bryce was on his feet. Your Honor, this is completely out of line. Overruled. Brennan's face was stone. Major, where are you going with this? I'm establishing that Ms. Donovan has been manipulating this court, using her supposed heroism to influence Mr. Walsh's case, when in reality, she's trying to absolve herself of guilt. Claire's hands were shaking now, not from fear, from rage. That's not true, she said. Granger turned to her. Then tell the court. Tell them why you really showed up for Kenneth Walsh. Tell them about Kandahar. The courtroom was silent. Claire looked at Walsh, saw the confusion, the hurt, the betrayal in his eyes. She'd wanted to protect him from this, wanted to keep her past buried so he wouldn't have to carry the weight of her choices. But Granger had taken that option away. Your Honor, Claire said quietly. May I speak? Brennan hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead. Claire stepped into the aisle, facing the room, facing Walsh, facing the truth she'd run from for 8 years. My name is Claire Donovan. I served as a combat medic attached to Special Operations in Afghanistan. On February 23, 2018, my unit was ambushed. 2 soldiers were critically wounded. I had to make a choice. Her voice didn't waver. I chose to treat Danny Walsh because his injuries were survivable. Marcus Reeves had sustained fatal trauma. I couldn't save them both. Walsh's face crumbled. The investigation cleared me, Claire continued. But Major Granger disagreed with that finding. He believed I made the wrong call, that I prioritized Danny because his father was important. She met Granger's eyes. But that's not what happened. I made the call based on medical assessment, not politics, not guilt, not favoritism. Then why show up for his father? Granger demanded. Because Kenneth Walsh was sitting on a bench in the rain with nowhere to go and nobody to help him. Claire's voice hardened. Because I don't abandon people. Not in combat, not in a courtroom. Not ever. You abandoned Marcus Reeves. I made an impossible choice under fire, and I've lived with it every day since. Claire turned to Walsh. I didn't tell you who I was because I didn't want you to feel obligated. Didn't want you to relive your son's death. I just wanted to make sure you had someone in your corner. Walsh was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. But Major Granger is right about one thing, Claire said. I do carry guilt. Not for the choice I made, but for every soldier I couldn't save, including your son. I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh. I'm sorry I couldn't do more. The courtroom was dead silent. Then Walsh stood, walked across the floor, and stopped in front of Claire. My son talked about you, he said quietly, before he died. He said there was a medic who saved him 3 times, who kept him alive when everyone else said he was done. His voice cracked. He called you an angel. Claire's throat tightened. I never knew who you were, Walsh continued, but Danny did, and he trusted you. He looked her in the eyes. So I trust you. He held out his hand. Claire took it. The room erupted. Reporters shouting, cameras flashing, Granger trying to talk over the noise. And then the courtroom doors burst open. Commander Hayes strode in, followed by two men in suits. "Your Honor," Hayes announced, "I'm Commander Lucas Hayes, Naval Special Warfare. These are agents from the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. We're here to arrest Major Philip Granger." The room went silent. Granger went white. "On what charge?" "Unauthorized disclosure of classified information, misuse of military records, and conspiracy to obstruct justice." Hayes handed a folder to Brennan. "We have evidence that Major Granger illegally accessed Claire Donovan's service record, leaked classified information to media outlets, and attempted to manipulate these proceedings." Granger stepped back. "This is insane. You're under arrest, Major." One of the DCIS agents moved forward. "Please come with us." Granger looked around wildly, then bolted for the side door. He didn't make it 3 steps before Hayes tackled him to the ground. Hayes had Granger pinned to the courtroom floor in under 2 seconds, one knee pressed between the Major's shoulder blades, hands already cuffing him with practiced efficiency. Granger's face was mashed against the tile, his uniform ribbons catching the overhead lights as he struggled uselessly against a SEAL's grip. "Get off me!" Granger's voice was muffled, panicked. "You have no authority." "DCIS has all the authority we need," one of the suited agents said, crouching down. "Major Philip Granger, you're under arrest for violations of the Espionage Act, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and misuse of government computer systems." He rattled off the Miranda rights while Hayes hauled Granger to his feet. The courtroom had descended into controlled chaos. Reporters were shouting questions. Camera phones were out. The bailiff was trying to restore order. Judge Brennan sat frozen behind the bench, gavel in hand, but seemingly unable to remember what to do with it. Claire stood in the middle of the aisle, Kenneth Walsh still beside her, both of them watching Granger get dragged toward the doors. Granger twisted in Hayes's grip, eyes locking onto Claire one last time. "This isn't over. The truth is going to come out. Everyone's going to know what you did." "They already know," Claire said quietly. "I just told them." "You let Marcus die." "I made the best call I could with the information I had." Claire's voice cut through the noise like a scalpel. "You made a vendetta out of grief. Those aren't the same thing." Granger's face contorted with rage, but Hayes was already pushing him through the doors. The DCIS agents followed. The sounds of struggle faded into the hallway. Silence fell slowly, like dust settling after an explosion. Brennan cleared his throat. "I'm going to call a recess. Everyone out, now." The gallery emptied reluctantly, spectators and reporters filing out while casting backward glances. Dana Clifton gathered her files without a word and left. Aaron Bryce stood uncertainly beside his table, looking like someone who'd just watched a trial turn into a military operation. Claire started toward the doors, but Brennan's voice stopped her. "Ms. Donovan, Mr. Walsh, please stay." Claire and Walsh exchanged glances. Walsh looked wrecked, pale, trembling, eyes red from crying. But he nodded. They approached the bench together. Brennan removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes, and set them down carefully. When he looked up, he looked older than he had 2 days ago. "I owe you both an apology," he said. "I allowed my courtroom to be used as a weapon. I made assumptions without checking facts. I humiliated you, Ms. Donovan, in front of everyone." He paused. "And I almost destroyed Mr. Walsh's case in the process." "Your Honor," Walsh started. "Let me finish." Brennan's voice was firm, but not unkind. "Mr. Walsh, the charges against you are being dropped, effective immediately. The prosecution has no case, and frankly, this court has wasted enough of your time." Walsh's knees buckled slightly. Claire caught his elbow, steadied him. "As for you, Ms. Donovan," Brennan met her eyes. "I misjudged you badly. I saw a nurse in scrubs wearing a medal and assumed you were performing. I didn't see what everyone in this room saw yesterday when you saved Mr. Walsh's life. I didn't see the soldier, the medic, the person who shows up when nobody else will." He stood. "I'm sorry." Claire nodded once. "Thank you, Your Honor." "I'm also ordering a formal review of how Major Granger gained access to this proceeding and whether any other parties were involved in this conspiracy." Brennan looked at the empty courtroom. "This case is closed. You're both free to go." Walsh turned to leave, but Claire stayed. Your Honor, one more thing. Brennan waited. There will be questions? About Kandahar? About the decision I made? About Marcus Reeves? Claire's voice was steady. I want those questions answered properly. Not through leaks, not through conspiracies, through the official record. What are you asking for? I want the investigation reopened, publicly, with full transparency. Brennan frowned. Ms. Donovan, you were cleared. I was cleared in a closed hearing that left room for doubt. Major Granger spent 8 years believing I made the wrong call. Marcus Reeves's family spent 8 years believing I let him die for political reasons. Claire stepped closer. I want the record set straight. For everyone. That's not something this court can order. No, but Commander Hayes can, the military can. Claire met his eyes. I'm asking you to recommend it. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I'll make the recommendation to JAG. What happens after that is out of my hands. That's all I'm asking. Claire turned and walked out, Walsh following. They made it to the hallway before the reporters descended. Questions came from every direction, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Claire kept her head down, moving through the crowd with Walsh close behind. Hayes appeared from somewhere, creating a buffer with his body and his uniform, pushing people back. No comment, Hayes said firmly. Give them space. They made it to the parking lot. Hayes guided them to his truck, got them inside, and pulled out before the press could regroup. Nobody spoke for the first 5 minutes. Then Walsh broke the silence. Why didn't you tell me? Claire looked at him. Tell you what? That you were there. That you saved Danny. Because it didn't matter. It mattered to me. I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything. I didn't want your gratitude or your guilt or your questions. Claire's voice softened. I just wanted to make sure you weren't alone. Walsh was quiet, staring out the window at Ridgefield's passing streets. Danny talked about you. In his last letter, he said there was a medic who kept pulling him out of impossible situations, said you were fearless. I wasn't fearless, I was just doing my job. He said you argued with officers when they wanted to move him before he was stable, said you told a colonel to shut up once. Claire almost smiled. That sounds right. He respected you. Walsh looked at her. And I respect what you did today, standing up there, telling the truth even when it hurt. I should have told you sooner. Maybe. But I understand why you didn't. Walsh's voice cracked slightly. I spent 8 years angry at the military for taking my son, angry at the war, angry at everyone. He paused. I never stopped to think about the people who tried to save him, who fought to keep him alive. I'm sorry for that. Claire didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. Hayes pulled up to St. Catherine's Hospital. Walsh, they're going to want to check you over. Make sure leaving earlier didn't cause any complications. I'm fine. You collapsed in a courtroom 48 hours ago. You're not fine. Get checked. Walsh sighed but didn't argue. He climbed out, paused, then looked back at Claire through the open door. Thank you, he said simply. Then he walked into the hospital. Hayes waited until he was inside before pulling away. You okay? I don't know yet. That was a hell of a thing you did. Asking for the investigation to be reopened. It's the only way to end this. Granger's been arrested, but the questions won't stop. People will keep wondering if I made the right call, if I let Marcus Reeves die for the wrong reasons. Claire looked at Hayes. I need the record clear, not for me, for Marcus's family. They deserve to know the truth wasn't covered up. Hayes nodded slowly. I'll talk to JAG, push for a full review with civilian oversight. Make sure it's transparent. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly. The press will dig into everything. Your deployments, your decisions, every save and every loss. I know. And you're still willing to do it? I don't have a choice. Not anymore. Hayes drove in silence for a moment. Then he glanced at her. For what it's worth, I read the original report. From 2018. Every page, every witness statement, every medical assessment. Claire waited. You made the right call, Hayes said quietly. Marcus Reeves had a tension pneumothorax, bilateral rib fractures, and suspected aortic rupture. Even if you'd worked on him first, he wouldn't have made it. The trauma was too severe. Granger didn't think so. Granger wasn't there. You were. Hayes pulled up to Claire's apartment. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Claire climbed out. Commander, why did you really show up yesterday? At the courthouse. Hayes smiled slightly. I got a call from someone who said a decorated medic was being mistreated. Someone who knew exactly who you were and what you'd done. Who? Captain Nora Vance, your old CO. Claire went still. Vance called you? She did. Said she'd been keeping tabs on you, making sure you were okay. When she heard what was happening in that courtroom, she reached out. Hayes met her eyes. You're not as alone as you think you are, Donovan. He drove away, leaving Claire standing in the early afternoon sun. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The first thing she did was call Nora Vance. Vance answered immediately. Took you long enough. You called Hayes. I did. Why? Because you needed backup, and because I knew you wouldn't ask for it. Vance's voice softened slightly. I told you 3 years ago that leaving was a mistake. You didn't listen, but that doesn't mean I stopped caring about what happened to you. Claire sat down at her kitchen table. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank whoever had the sense to post that video online. That's how I found out what was happening. You've been watching me? Not actively, but I set up alerts. Your name, your unit designation, anything that might indicate you'd resurfaced. Vance paused. When that article came out yesterday with your call sign, I knew something was wrong. So I made some calls, found out about Granger, about his obsession with the Kandahar case, and I realized he'd been waiting for you to surface. He planned this whole thing. He did, and he almost got away with it. Vance's voice hardened. But he underestimated you. He thought you'd run, thought you'd hide like you've been doing for 8 years. He didn't expect you to stand up and own your story. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. You just finally made the right one. Vance was quiet for a moment. The investigation's going to be reopened, probably within the week. Are you ready for that? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Good. Because I'm going to testify. So is Hayes, so are half a dozen soldiers who served with you. We're going to make sure the record shows exactly what happened in Kandahar, and we're going to make sure Marcus Reeves's family gets the truth. Claire's throat tightened. Captain, it's Nora. You're not military anymore, and neither am I, technically. I retired 6 months ago. Claire blinked. You retired? I did. Decided I'd spent enough time dealing with bureaucracy and not enough time dealing with things that mattered. Nora's voice carried a hint of humor. Besides, someone needs to keep an eye on stubborn former medics who think they can save the world one veteran at a time. Claire almost laughed. Almost. Get some rest, Claire. You look like hell, I'm sure. How would you know? Because I've seen the photos. You're all over the news. The line went dead. Claire set her phone down and pulled up the news sites again. The story had exploded. Every major outlet was covering it now. The courthouse confrontation, Granger's arrest, Claire's revelation about Kandahar, Kenneth Walsh's charges being dropped, and the video of her doing CPR had been viewed over 2 million times. The comments were a mix of support and skepticism. Some people called her a hero. Others questioned her decisions. A few accused her of seeking attention. But buried in the comments, Claire found one that stopped her cold. My brother was Marcus Reeves. I spent 8 years hating the medic who let him die. Now I don't know what to think. I want answers, real answers, not conspiracy theories, not accusations, just the truth. It was signed Eric Reeves. Claire stared at the screen. Eric Reeves. The brother who'd filed the complaint, who'd shown up at the hearing, who'd made threats. The brother she'd assumed was behind this whole thing. But he wasn't. He was just a man looking for answers. Claire opened a reply box, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then she typed, Mr. Reeves, I'm Claire Donovan. I'm sorry for your loss. Your brother was a good soldier. I made the decision I thought was right under impossible circumstances. I've requested the investigation be reopened with full transparency so you can have the answers you deserve. If you want to talk, I'm willing to listen. She posted it before she could second-guess herself. Then she closed the laptop, made coffee, and sat at her table waiting for her phone to ring. It rang 20 minutes later. Unknown number. Claire answered. Hello? This is Eric Reeves. The voice was rough, strained. You really the medic who was there when my brother died? Yes. You really asking for the investigation to be reopened? Yes. Silence. Then, why? Because you deserve the truth, and because I'm tired of running from it. Granger told me things about what happened that day, about how you chose the other soldier because his father was important. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? Claire took a breath. Your brother and Danny Walsh were both critically wounded in an ambush. I assessed both casualties. Marcus had a collapsed lung, broken ribs, and internal bleeding. Danny had a leg wound and shrapnel injuries. Both were bad. But Marcus's injuries were catastrophic. Even with immediate intervention, his survival chances were under 10%. Danny's were around 40% if I stabilized him fast. So you let Marcus die. I made the call that gave someone a chance to survive. That's what combat medics do. We triage. We prioritize based on who can be saved. Not politics, not favoritism, medical reality. Eric was quiet for a long time. Did he suffer? Claire's chest tightened. No, he was unconscious. He didn't feel pain. Did you try it all? I did everything I could in the time I had, but I couldn't save them both. Claire's voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry. I wish I could have done more. Danny Walsh died anyway, right? He did, 20 minutes later, but he got to talk to his father before he died. Got to say goodbye. Marcus didn't get that. No, he didn't, and I'm sorry for that too. Eric exhaled slowly. I hated you for 8 years. Didn't even know your name, but I hated you. I know. Granger told me you were a coward, that you made the easy choice. There was nothing easy about it. I'm starting to see that. Eric paused. I want to be there when they reopen the investigation. I want to hear everything, all of it. No classified bullshit, no redactions. I want the truth. You'll get it. I promise. Why should I believe you? Because I'm the one asking for it to be reopened. I'm the one who's going to sit there and answer every question, no matter how hard they are. I'm not hiding anymore. Another long silence. Then, okay, I'll be watching. The line went dead. Claire set the phone down, hands shaking slightly. That was the hardest conversation she'd had in years. Harder than the courtroom. Harder than talking to Walsh. Because Eric Reeves had every right to hate her. Every right to blame her. And part of her had always believed he was right to. But now she had to prove he wasn't. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Hayes. Turn on the news, Channel 7. Claire grabbed the remote, flipped to the channel. A press conference was underway. The seal of the Department of Defense filled the screen. A spokesperson stood at a podium reading from prepared remarks. In light of recent events and public interest, the Department of Defense has authorized a full review of the February 2018 combat incident in Kandahar Province involving combat medic Claire Donovan and casualties Sergeant Marcus Reeves and Lieutenant Danny Walsh. This review will be conducted with civilian oversight and will include public testimony from all available witnesses. The goal is to provide transparency and closure for the families involved. Claire watched, barely breathing. Additionally, Major Philip Granger has been formally charged with multiple felonies related to the unauthorized disclosure of classified information and abuse of his position. An investigation into his conduct is ongoing. The spokesperson took questions. Reporters shouted over each other. Is Donovan being investigated for wrongdoing? No, this is a fact-finding review, not a criminal investigation. Will the findings be made public? Yes, within reason. Certain operational details will remain classified for national security purposes, but the core findings will be released. When will the hearings begin? Within 30 days. Claire turned off the TV. 30 days. 1 month until she had to stand up in front of cameras, reporters, families, and the entire world and defend the worst decision she'd ever made. But she'd asked for this, and she was going to see it through. Her phone buzzed. Text from Walsh. Saw the news. You doing okay? Claire typed back. Getting there. You? Same. Thank you for everything. She set the phone down and looked around her small apartment. This place had been her refuge for 3 years. Her hiding spot. Her quiet corner away from the noise and the questions and the weight of decisions made under fire. But she couldn't hide anymore. The world knew who she was now, knew her name, knew her story, knew the call sign soldiers had given her in the dark. Ghost Angel. She'd tried to bury that person, tried to become someone else, someone normal, someone who saved lives in controlled environments where the choices were clear and the consequences were manageable. But that person had never really existed. Claire Donovan, ER nurse, was the same person as Ghost Angel, combat medic. Same hands, same training, same instinct to show up when nobody else would. She'd just been pretending otherwise. The next morning, Claire went back to Maplewood General Hospital. Dr. Castellano saw her walk in and immediately pulled her aside. "You're all over the news." "I know." "Are you okay to work?" "I need to work." Castellano studied her for a moment. "All right, but if it gets to be too much, it won't." He nodded and let her clock in. The shift was brutal. Not because of the patients, those were standard ER chaos, but because of the stares. Every nurse, doctor, and orderly who passed her looked twice. Some smiled, some nodded, some just stared. By lunch, Claire was exhausted from the attention. She grabbed a sandwich from the cafeteria and found a quiet corner to eat. 5 minutes later, a young nurse, maybe 23, fresh out of school, approached hesitantly. "Ms. Donovan?" Claire looked up. "Yeah?" "I just wanted to say, what you did was incredible, standing up like that, telling your story." Claire didn't know what to say. "Thanks. My brother's in the Army, deployed right now. And knowing there are people like you out there who'd fight to save him," the nurse's eyes filled. "It matters." She walked away before Claire could respond. Similar interactions happened throughout the day. A paramedic who shook her hand, a doctor who thanked her for her service, a patient's family member who recognized her from the news and called her a hero. Claire didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who'd made impossible choices and was finally being forced to answer for them. By the end of her shift, she was running on fumes. She clocked out, changed, and walked to her car. A man was waiting in the parking lot. Claire's hand moved instinctively to her keys, threading them between her fingers like a weapon. But the man held up his hands, showing he was unarmed. "Ms. Donovan, I'm not here to hurt you. I just need to talk." Claire stopped. "Who are you?" "My name is Thomas Granger, Philip's brother." Claire went cold. "What do you want?" "I want you to drop the investigation." "That's not happening." "Please." Thomas stepped closer, not threatening, pleading. "My brother made mistakes, bad ones. But if this goes public, it'll destroy him, destroy our family. He tried to destroy me first. I know. And I'm not defending what he did, but he's still my brother." Thomas's voice cracked. He lost everything when Marcus Reeves died. His career stalled. His marriage fell apart. He became obsessed with proving you made the wrong call because he couldn't accept that sometimes people just die. That doesn't excuse what he did. I know, but please, don't make this public. Let the military handle it quietly. Don't drag our family through the mud. Claire looked at him, saw the desperation, the fear. The same look Kenneth Walsh had when he thought he was going to lose everything. "Your brother leaked classified information," Claire said quietly. "He manipulated a federal court proceeding. He tried to destroy Kenneth Walsh's case and my reputation. And he did it all because he couldn't let go of his anger. He's sick. He needs help. Then he'll get help. In prison." Thomas's face hardened. "If you go through with this, I'll make sure everyone knows about Kandahar. Every detail. Every mistake. I'll make sure Marcus Reeves's family sues you for wrongful death. I'll make sure you never work as a nurse again." Claire stepped closer. "You can try, but the truth is already out. And threatening me just proves you're as broken as your brother." She walked past him, got in her car, and drove away. In her rearview mirror, she saw Thomas Granger standing alone in the parking lot, shoulders slumped, defeated. Claire drove home, parked, and sat in her car for a long time. This was what the next month was going to be like. Threats, pressure, people trying to make her back down. But she wasn't backing down. Not this time. Her phone buzzed. Email notification. The subject line stopped her. Urgent. Additional evidence? Kandahar incident. Claire opened it. The email was from an address she didn't recognize. No message. just an attachment, a video file. Claire's finger hovered over it, then she clicked. The video loaded. Grainy helmet cam footage from 2018. She recognized the location immediately, the compound where the ambush happened. The footage showed the firefight, showed her moving between casualties, showed the moment she knelt beside Marcus Reeves, assessed him, then moved to Danny Walsh. But it also showed something else, something that had never been in the official report. Marcus Reeves, barely conscious, reaching up and grabbing her arm. And in the chaos and gunfire, his voice, faint but audible on the audio. "Help Walsh first. He's got kids." Claire's blood went cold. The video continued, showed her hesitating, showed Marcus's hand falling away, showed her moving to Danny Walsh. The video ended. Claire sat frozen, staring at the screen. Marcus Reeves had told her to save Danny Walsh first. He'd made the choice himself, and nobody knew. Claire played the video 3 more times, each viewing confirming what her memory had buried under 8 years of guilt and second-guessing. Marcus Reeves's voice was faint, distorted by gunfire and radio chatter, but unmistakable on the helmet cam audio. "Help Walsh first. He's got kids." She'd heard those words in the moment, processed them in the fraction of a second she had to make her decision, then locked them away in the part of her brain that stored trauma she couldn't afford to examine. Now they were back. Evidence. Proof. The answer to 8 years of questions. Her hand shook as she forwarded the video to Hayes, to Nora Vance, to the JAG office handling the review. Then she sat back and tried to breathe through the knot in her chest. Marcus Reeves hadn't been a victim of her choice. He'd made the choice himself, and she'd been carrying the weight of his death alone because nobody knew. Her phone rang within minutes. Hayes. "Where did you get this?" Anonymous email. No sender information. "Claire, this changes everything. This is evidence that Reeves gave explicit direction regarding treatment priority. That removes any question of bias or misconduct on your part." "I know. Why didn't you mention this in the original investigation?" "Because I wasn't sure I'd heard him correctly. The firefight was loud, he was barely conscious. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, wanted to hear it." Claire's voice was raw, and the investigators never asked. They focused on my medical assessment, my triage decision. Nobody asked if Reeves had said anything. Hayes was quiet for a moment. "Who else had access to this footage? Unit members? Command? Anyone reviewing the after-action reports?" Claire thought for a second. "Wait, the footage would have been part of the classified file, the same file Granger accessed. So he saw this. He had to, which means he knew. He knew Marcus told me to save Danny first, and he buried it anyway. That makes this so much worse for him." Hayes' voice hardened. "Withholding exculpatory evidence during an investigation, manipulating records, we're adding charges." Claire closed her eyes. "I need to tell Eric Reeves, before this goes public. He deserves to hear it from me. I'll set up a meeting, supervised, with witnesses." "When?" "Tomorrow. I'll call you with details." The line went dead. Claire sat in her darkening apartment, watching the video one more time. She'd spent 8 years believing she'd stolen Marcus Reeves's last moments from his family. 8 years carrying the weight of a choice that had never been fully hers to make. But Marcus had made it. He'd used his last conscious breath to ensure someone else's father got to say goodbye. That was the truth nobody knew. The meeting happened at Fort Carson, in a neutral conference room with gray walls and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. Eric Reeves arrived with his wife, both of them tense and guarded. Claire sat across from them with Hayes beside her and a JAG officer at the head of the table recording everything. Eric looked older than his photo suggested, late 40s, graying hair, eyes that had seen too much grief. "Thank you for coming," Claire said. Eric nodded stiffly. "You said you had something to show me." "I do, but it's going to be hard to watch." "Everything about my brother's death has been hard." Claire slid her laptop across the table, video already queued. "This is helmet cam footage from the day Marcus died. It was part of the classified file. I only saw it yesterday." Eric's wife reached for his hand as he pressed play. The video ran in silence. Claire watched Eric's face instead of the screen, saw him flinch at the gunfire, saw his jaw tighten when Marcus appeared on camera, bleeding and barely conscious. saw his eyes widen when the audio caught Marcus's words. "Help Walsh first. He's got kids." The video ended. Eric sat frozen, staring at the blank screen. His wife was crying silently. "I didn't remember hearing that until I saw the footage," Claire said quietly. "Everything was chaos. I was operating on instinct, but he did say it, and I did what he asked." Eric looked up, eyes red. Why wasn't this in the investigation? Because nobody asked the right questions. The investigators focused on my medical assessment. They didn't review all the helmet cam footage. And Major Granger, Claire's voice hardened. He accessed this file. He saw this video, and he buried it because it didn't fit his narrative. He knew. Eric's voice was barely above a whisper. He knew Marcus made the call, and he lied to me. Yes. Eric stood abruptly, chair scraping against linoleum. He walked to the window, back to the room, shoulders shaking. His wife went to him, wrapped her arms around him from behind. "I blamed you," Eric said, voice breaking. "For 8 years I blamed you for letting my brother die. I told people you were a coward. I filed complaints. I ruined your career. You didn't ruin anything. You were grieving. You deserved answers. I deserved the truth, not Granger's lies." Eric turned, tears streaming down his face. "My brother died a hero. He made a choice to save someone else's family, and Granger took that away from him, made him look like a victim instead of the man he was." Claire stood. "I'm sorry I didn't fight harder to make sure you knew. I should have—" "No." Eric crossed the room, stopped in front of her. "You did your job. You honored his request, and you've been carrying the weight of his death when you should have been carrying the weight of his sacrifice." He held out his hand. "Thank you. For saving Danny Walsh. For giving his father those last moments. For doing what my brother asked." Claire took his hand, throat too tight to speak. Eric's wife joined them. "What happens now? To Granger?" Hayes answered. "He's facing federal charges. The video evidence adds obstruction of justice and evidence tampering to the list. He's looking at serious prison time." "Good," Eric said simply. "And the review? Of the Kandahar incident?" "It'll proceed," the JAG officer said. "But with this new evidence, the findings are likely to confirm combat medic Donovan acted appropriately and in accordance with the casualties' expressed wishes." Eric looked at Claire. "Will you be there? At the hearing?" "Yes. I want to testify. I want to tell them about my brother, who he really was." "You'll get the chance." The meeting ended 30 minutes later. Eric and his wife left, but not before Eric hugged Claire. Brief, awkward, but genuine. "Marcus would have liked you," he said. "He always respected people who did the hard jobs." Then they were gone. Claire stood in the empty conference room, feeling lighter than she had in years. Hayes leaned against the table. "You okay?" "Getting there. The hearing's set for 2 weeks from now. Public testimony. Full transparency. Are you ready?" "No, but I will be." The 2 weeks passed in a blur. Claire worked her shifts at Maplewood General, fielded calls from reporters she mostly ignored, and prepared her testimony with help from Nora Vance. Kenneth Walsh checked in daily, offering support and asking if she needed anything. She always said no, but appreciated the gesture. The video had leaked online, probably from someone in the review process, and went viral within hours. Public opinion shifted dramatically. People who'd questioned Claire's decisions were now calling for Granger's head. Marcus Reeves was being celebrated as a hero who'd made the ultimate sacrifice, not just with his life, but with his choice to save another soldier's family. Dana Clifton, the prosecutor from Kenneth Walsh's case, issued a public apology for her role in the courthouse incident. Judge Marcus Brennan submitted to a formal ethics review and was reprimanded for allowing his courtroom to be manipulated. Thomas Granger disappeared from public view after his brother's additional charges were announced, and Claire prepared to face the one thing she'd been avoiding for 8 years, telling her story in full, with nothing held back. The hearing took place in a federal building in Denver, chosen for its size and ability to accommodate press and public interest. The room was packed. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled the gallery. Eric Reeves sat in the front row with his family. Kenneth Walsh sat beside them. Claire entered in civilian clothes, slacks, a simple blouse, no uniform, no medals. She'd been advised to wear them, to play up the military service angle. She'd refused. She wasn't performing. She was testifying. The panel consisted of 3 officers, 2 Army, 1 Navy, and 2 civilian oversight members. They sat behind a raised desk, official and imposing. The lead officer, a colonel named Patricia Hendricks, called the hearing to order. This review has been convened to examine the events of February 23, 2018, in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, specifically the medical decisions made by combat medic Claire Donovan during a hostile engagement that resulted in the deaths of Sergeant Marcus Reeves and Lieutenant Danny Walsh. Ms. Donovan, please approach. Claire walked to the witness table, was sworn in, and sat. Hendricks opened a file. Ms. Donovan, in your own words, please describe what happened that day. Claire took a breath. Then she told the story. She described the convoy, the IED, the ambush that followed, the casualties, 12 wounded, 2 critical. She described her assessment of Marcus Reeves, catastrophic chest trauma, internal bleeding, diminished consciousness. She described her assessment of Danny Walsh, severe leg wound, shrapnel injuries, shock, but responsive. Then she described the moment that had defined 8 years of her life. Sergeant Reeves regained consciousness briefly. He grabbed my arm. I leaned in to assess his mental status. He said, "Help Walsh first. He's got kids." Claire's voice didn't waver. I had maybe 30 seconds to decide. I assessed that Sergeant Reeves's injuries were likely fatal regardless of intervention. Lieutenant Walsh's were severe but survivable with immediate treatment. Based on medical triage protocol and Sergeant Reeves's expressed wishes, I prioritized Lieutenant Walsh. Did you attempt any intervention for Sergeant Reeves? I did. I directed another medic to maintain airway and apply pressure to his chest wound, but my primary focus was on stabilizing Lieutenant Walsh. And the outcome? Sergeant Reeves died 4 minutes after the initial assessment. Lieutenant Walsh died 20 minutes later, but remained conscious long enough to communicate with his father via satellite radio. Hendricks made notes. Why didn't you report Sergeant Reeves's statement in the original investigation? I wasn't certain I'd heard him correctly. The environment was chaotic. I was operating under extreme stress, and when investigators focused solely on my medical assessment, I didn't think to bring it up. I assumed they had access to all helmet cam footage. They didn't. The footage was classified and not fully reviewed until recently. I understand that now. The questioning continued for 2 hours. Every decision was examined. Every choice was scrutinized. Claire answered each question clearly, clinically, without emotion. Then Hendricks asked the question Claire had been dreading. Ms. Donovan, do you believe you made the right call? Claire met her eyes. I believe I made the best call I could with the information I had in the time I had to make it. Could someone else have made a different choice? Maybe. Could that choice have resulted in a different outcome? I don't know, but I stand by my decision. Even knowing both men died anyway? Even knowing that. Because triage isn't about guarantees. It's about giving people the best chance possible. I gave Lieutenant Walsh that chance, and I honored Sergeant Reeves's final request. That's what medics do. Hendricks nodded slowly. Thank you. You may step down. Claire returned to her seat in the gallery. Eric Reeves testified next, describing his brother's character, his service, his decision to ensure another family got closure. Kenneth Walsh testified about hearing his son's voice one last time, about the medic who made that possible. Nora Vance testified about Claire's service record, her saves, her reputation among the soldiers she'd served with. Commander Hayes testified about the investigation into Granger, the evidence manipulation, the conspiracy. The hearing lasted 8 hours. At the end, Colonel Hendricks read the panel's preliminary findings. After reviewing all available evidence, including recently discovered helmet cam footage, this panel finds that combat medic Claire Donovan acted in accordance with established medical triage protocols and followed the expressed wishes of Sergeant Marcus Reeves regarding treatment priority. No evidence of bias, misconduct, or negligence was found. The panel recommends full exoneration and commends Ms. Donovan for her service under extreme circumstances. The room erupted. Reporters rushed forward. Eric Reeves was crying. Kenneth Walsh was clapping. Cameras flashed. Claire sat perfectly still, letting the noise wash over her. It was over. 8 years of questions. 8 years of doubt. 8 years of carrying weight that had never been fully hers to carry. Over. She stood and walked out through the side exit before anyone could stop her for interviews. Hayes caught up with her in the hallway. You did it. We did it. No. You did this. You asked for the truth. You stood up and demanded answers. That took guts. Claire managed a small smile. I learned from the best. Vance? And you. Hayes handed her a folder. Official findings. They'll be published tomorrow, but I wanted you to have a copy now. Claire took it, flipped through the pages. Words like exemplary service and heroic actions and full exoneration jumped out at her. At the bottom, a recommendation. The panel recommends combat medic Claire Donovan be considered for the Silver Star for her actions on February 23, 2018, which directly resulted in saving multiple lives under hostile fire. Claire closed the folder. I don't want it. Claire. I didn't do this for medals. I did it because it was my job. Because soldiers needed me. That's enough. Hayes studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. But the recommendation stands, whether you accept it or not. What happens to Granger? Trial's set for next month. Between the evidence tampering, the classified leaks, and the obstruction charges, he's looking at 15 to 20 years. Maybe more if they add the conspiracy charges. And Thomas Granger? Under investigation for making threats. Probably won't face charges, but he's been warned. Claire nodded. And Kenneth Walsh? Charges dropped permanently. The VA's working with him to get his benefits reinstated and his medical bills covered. He's also been offered a job counseling other veterans going through similar situations. He'll be good at that. He will, because he had someone show up for him when nobody else would. Claire turned to leave, but Hayes stopped her. One more thing. There's someone here who wants to talk to you. He gestured down the hall. A woman in her 60s stood waiting, gray hair pulled back, wearing a simple dress and a medal around her neck. She looked familiar in a way Claire couldn't place. Then the woman spoke, and Claire's breath caught. My name is Sarah Reeves, Marcus's mother. Claire went still. Sarah approached slowly, eyes wet but steady. I saw the video. I heard what my son said. I wanted to thank you. Mrs. Reeves. No. Let me finish. Sarah's voice was firm but kind. I spent 8 years believing you let my son die because he wasn't important enough. Eric told me that. Granger told me that. And I believed it because it was easier than accepting that sometimes people just die in war. She paused. But my son didn't just die. He made a choice. He used his last breath to make sure another family didn't feel what we felt. And you honored that choice. Claire's throat tightened. I wish I could have saved them both. I know, but you couldn't, and Marcus knew that. He made the call so you didn't have to carry it alone. Sarah reached out, took Claire's hands. Thank you for trying. Thank you for honoring his request. And thank you for finally telling the truth, even when it hurt you to do it. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for what we put you through. You didn't deserve it. Sarah pulled Claire into a hug, brief but fierce. Then she stepped back, wiping her eyes. Eric told me you're a nurse now. Still saving lives. Trying to. My son would be proud of that. Sarah smiled sadly. Keep doing it. For all the soldiers who didn't make it home. Keep saving the ones you can. Then she walked away, leaving Claire standing in the hallway with tears streaming down her face. 1 week later, Claire returned to Maplewood General Hospital for her shift. The staff had hung a banner in the break room. Welcome back, hero. Claire tore it down immediately, but Dr. Castellano caught her. Leave it, just for today. I'm not a hero. You are to the people here. Deal with it. The shift was routine. Overdoses, car accidents, a kid who'd swallowed a Lego. Claire worked through each case with the same focus she'd always had. Hands steady, mind clear. Around 3 a.m., during a rare quiet moment, she checked her phone. An email from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Subject: Program Proposal, Veteran Support Initiative. The email outlined a new program being developed to connect former combat medics with veterans struggling with medical and legal issues. The VA was looking for someone to help design and lead the program. They wanted Claire. She stared at the email for a long time. Then she forwarded it to Kenneth Walsh with a simple message. Interested in helping me with this? His response came back in under a minute. Absolutely. Claire smiled and put her phone away. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. By the time she clocked out at 7 a.m., the sun was rising over Ridgefield, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. She walked to her car, exhausted but lighter than she'd felt in years. Her phone buzzed. Text from Nora Vance. Saw the news. Proud of you. Coffee sometime? Claire typed back. Name the place. She drove home through quiet streets, past the courthouse where this had all started, past the hospital where she'd built her second life, past the quiet corners where she'd hidden for too long. She wasn't hiding anymore. Claire Donovan had spent 8 years running from a choice she'd made in the worst moment of her life. She'd buried herself in scrubs and hospital shifts, convinced that if she stayed quiet enough, small enough, invisible enough, the weight of that choice would fade. But weight doesn't fade. It just shifts. And the only way to carry it was to share it with the people who deserved the truth, with the families who needed closure, with the soldiers who'd served beside her and knew what impossible choices looked like. She'd stood up in a courtroom and told her story. She'd faced her accusers. She'd demanded the truth be heard, even when it hurt, and she'd learned something she should have known all along. The strongest thing you can do isn't hiding from your past. It's standing in front of it and refusing to let it define you. Marcus Reeves had made a choice in his last moments, not to save himself, but to give someone else a chance. That was heroism. Claire had honored that choice, had carried the weight of it, had fought to make sure the truth survived. That was duty. And now she was going to keep doing what she'd always done, showing up for people who had nobody else. Veterans, patients, soldiers fighting battles nobody else saw. Not because she was a hero, because it was the right thing to do, and because she'd learned the hard way that the people who need help the most are usually the ones nobody's looking at. Claire pulled into her apartment parking lot, grabbed her bag, and climbed the stairs. The medal, the bronze star she'd worn to the courthouse, sat on her kitchen table where she'd left it. She picked it up, held it for a moment, then put it in a drawer. Not hidden, not displayed, just there. Part of her story, but not the whole story. Because Claire Donovan wasn't Ghost Angel anymore. She wasn't Combat Medic Donovan. She was just Claire, ER nurse, veteran, someone who'd made impossible choices and learned to live with them. Someone who'd been knocked down, humiliated, exposed, and had gotten back up anyway. Someone who understood that the hardest battles aren't always the ones fought with weapons. Sometimes they're fought with truth, with courage, with the simple refusal to let others write your story for you. She made coffee, sat at her table, and opened her laptop. Started drafting a proposal for the VA program, outlining how former combat medics could be paired with veterans navigating the impossible maze of benefits, healthcare, and legal issues. How people who'd made hard calls under fire could help others make hard calls in civilian life. How showing up mattered more than being perfect. The sun climbed higher outside her window. Her phone buzzed with messages. Hayes checking in, Walsh asking about meeting times, Eric Reeves sending a photo of his family at his brother's grave. Claire answered each one, then got back to work. Because the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, she was writing it herself. No more running, no more hiding, no more letting other people decide who she was or what her choices meant. Just the work. The mission. The quiet, relentless act of showing up for people who needed someone in their corner. That was enough. That had always been enough. And somewhere, in whatever came after, Claire hoped Marcus Reeves knew that his choice had mattered, that his sacrifice had meant something, that the family he'd saved had gotten their moment, and that the medic who'd honored his request had finally stopped running from the truth. She closed her laptop, finished her coffee, and stood. Time to get some sleep. Another shift started tonight. More patience. More saves. More impossible choices made with steady hands and a clear head. But this time, she'd make them knowing she didn't have to carry the weight alone. Because the truth was out. The record was clear. And the people who mattered knew exactly who Claire Donovan was. Not a hero, not a villain, not a ghost, just someone who showed up, every time, no matter what. And that was the strongest thing anyone could be.